So it's been a minute. In fact, it's been a year.
I think it's been a year. It was last April, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Mammoth.
The Being in the World podcast has one episode per year now. Very regularly,
Very
though.
regularly. Seasonally every April.
That would be a good concept for a show, right?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the concept of shows?
To have one show a year?
No,
Imagine
but-
if you had to wait a year after for each episode of
Oh,
Severance.
yeah.
Would you like it more?
No, I would not.
Why do you hate Severance?
Because it's slow. It's a narrative puzzle. I don't like narrative puzzles. I like kind of emotional and character puzzles. I find it self-defeating and rude when storytellers have the answers and just simply refuse to reveal them. It's like Chinese water torture. It's like one drop at a time, and they think that kind of mystery, because people fill in. We're like narrative engines, and so we fill in gaps. If we're ever given a gap, we fill it in, and then the like creators, I can generalize to not get kicked out of Hollywood or whatever, but like that you like when you hear these bits and pieces of something, your mind will fill it in, and everyone thinks that they themselves are good storytellers, so they'll fill in the gap with some theory, and they'll believe that it's really clever. And then the writers and the makers of the show then get all of the credit for all of the work that the audience has to do on the inside of their head. But really, that makes it a collaboration, not a kind of directorial, totalitarian story, which is what it should be.
I can't tell if I disagree with you because I love the show, or if I disagree fundamentally with what you're saying. But I find that I'm totally enamored and enthralled by how clever and unexpected every turn is, and I love the casting, and I love the characters, and I love the plot, and it always keeps me. This is only season. I've only watched season 1, but I love it. So we'll just agree to disagree. We're not here to talk about Severance.
I mean, what I do like is there's a basic. A lot of people watch it and almost like a Rorschach test, see aspects of their life in it, which I think is a success as a piece of art, which is that, like, I know someone who watched it who's addicted to drugs, and he said it reminds him of addiction, right? Like to have a severed personality, to have one self and another self. And I think about it like kind of different paths in life. And if I feel like a lot of people have taken that theme, that you have to present a different side of yourself to society at different times, as like very meaningful for their life. So that's, I think, a beautiful, like they succeeded beautifully in creating something that like appeals to many people.
Yeah, we just disagree on everything this morning because I don't relate to it at all. And
Really?
That has nothing to do with my enjoyment of it. Like, it never occurred to me, like, how does this apply to my life? I just see it as like great
Weird.
storytelling, great characters, great casting, great writing. And I never once watching any of the episodes did I think like, oh, this applies to my life in some interesting
You know what that
way.
means? That I think that means something very interesting. I guess you should be on the psychoanalytic couch, not me. I think it means that you get to be always yourself. I feel like that show appeals darkly, like very darkly, to people who have to put on a mask for certain pieces of their life. If it's work, if it's a psychological thing, if it's something like that.
But it also goes to show that you don't have to relate to something to enjoy it or appreciate it,
Yeah, that's nice.
which is good, I think.
That is nice.
So, how have you been for the last year?
Oh, how have I been? I mostly I kind of went off and researched a book. I went to Vienna for a while, for 3 months. And I've been working on a book. So I sold a book around this time last year, and it's due in a couple months.
Are you allowed to talk about it?
It's kind of a sequel to my first book, 19 Ways of Looking at Consciousness. I see it as this is just how I see it. I've always considered
Another 19?
I know, right? Yeah, there's so many kind of like, like I'm just going to call them low-hanging jokes. Okay. First of all, if I ever do a sequel to 19 Ways, the format is set, which is Octavio Paz edited the book that I took the title from, which is 19 Ways of Looking at Wong Wei, and then they had a 10-year kind of re-release, and It's so beautiful. It's just called 19 Ways of Looking at Wong Wei, now with more ways. And so I told my publisher, I was like, look, if we ever do like a 10-year thing, which won't happen because it didn't sell, but if we ever do a 10-year thing, it has to be 19 Ways of Looking at Consciousness, now with more ways. Because I like it like a blender with extra settings. You know, it reminds me of like we have 5 blades now. But I see it as I believe the greatest format for art is the trilogy, the triptych and the trilogy and the, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Like things come in threes.
This is why Dulcinea was upset that she's not on the podcast, because I only had 2 microphones, but three people on the show would be better. Maybe we'll get it set up for that. We're in a brand new space, and I've just come from Bombay Beach, where I spend 3.5 months each year and do this kind of great migration from the high desert to the low desert, and bring, animals and equipment and clothes and vehicles, and basically as much of my life as I can carry, trailers, and go from 3,300 feet of altitude to 300 feet below sea level when it gets quite cold and windy and unpleasant up here. I winter in Bombay.
Yeah.
That's how I like to say it. Bombay.
You're migratory species.
Yeah. And last fall, I fulfilled a lifelong dream of mine of building a Quonset hut. Some people call them Kwanzaa huts. They don't know that it's Quonset, Quonset. I'm dwelling on this a bit because we're inside the Quonset hut right now, and you were asking me, why is it called that?
Yeah.
And I think my understanding is in World War I, the British invented these lightweight portable buildings made of tin, and all the pieces are kind of the same size and shape, and they're like little kind of curves, and they can be transported on the back of a truck and erected very quickly as a kind of shelter and warehouse and hangar space. I mean, very multi-purpose. And then the Americans started making them in Quonset, Rhode Island. So it has nothing to do with probably the name of the town has to do with some Native American thing, but that's not why they're called that. It's just because the factory that built them was there.
And it's interesting, the kind of, I'm wondering about the theme of the modular structures that you have, like the way that you described your life. You like winter at a place and you move and you go from one to another. I mean, it does make sense that you would like that. Historically, this architecture is kind of something that can be rapidly built by a military, right? And like shipped around the world. And like I'm staring out at shipping containers, right? Like part of your aesthetic is this like modular, quick flight thing.
My first car was a VW bus, and I just loved the idea of being both able to venture out into the world and be mobile, but also have this cozy womb-like interior that's always very home. So you have this both. Esther Perel says you can't in one relationship have both adventure and kind of freedom and safety and security. These are contradictory needs that we have, and we expect one person to meet. And that's one of the sources of all our frustration with our partners. And I said, maybe this is true of human beings, but it's not true of trailers and RVs, because on the outside you have this projectile, phallic, hard, penis. The word I'm looking for.
Sometimes you just need to. There's this great John McPhee, the great New Yorker staff writer, and he teaches practice of nonfiction at Princeton. He says often when you're looking for, this is one of the greatest pieces of writing advice I've ever received. If you're in the thesaurus looking for like a synonym for a word or some other word, what you need to do is just go to the dictionary and type the actual definition of the word. Don't be fancy. Don't try to find a synonym or some other word. Just say the thing that you're trying to say at the root.
Exactly. And then on the interior, you have this womb-like maternal home experience. And so you can travel around and always have both of these needs met at the same time. And so I've always loved trailers. I've loved RVs. I've loved, like you said, shipping containers. I hadn't thought to like expand it into these other things, but the Quonset hut fits that. It's theoretically takedownable, but it's in practice, no. Now it's a building. But I like the idea that it could be erected quickly and that it's got this industrial side, but we've also created it very warm. And it gives the pool here, an architect friend said it gives the pool an architectural context that it lacked before. So we've got this kind of geometrical thing going on too, with this half circle, which reflects perfectly in the pool to make a full circle. And it was finished right before the Great Migration to Bombay Beach. So I didn't get to use it or appreciate it at all until yesterday, when we moved back up and then threw all this gear into here to play music, record podcasts. And then you came to visit after the Bombay Beach Convivium, which is what we called what used to be the Biennale, which has now moved into every other year, is now every odd numbered year will be called Convivium. Every even numbered year it will be called Biennale. And
which is, Convivium means like a grouping of unlike species, or grouping of unlike characters, or
no, so we were trying to figure out what we should call it on odd numbered years, when it was going to be smaller, more inward looking, facing more community oriented, and less spectacle based. Partly because my co-founders, Stefan and Lily, are unavailable to participate in every iteration every year. So they said, go ahead and do it, but don't have a different name. And we thought of symposium first, and no, because it's just too dry, academic. But the idea of the symposium is great.
Yeah.
So then I looked up synonyms of symposium. I did what I wasn't supposed to do. And I found the word convivium is the Latin symposium is Greek. The Latin ancient Roman version of the symposium was the convivium, which meant like feast or banquet, but also conviviality is a word that we know. So it means living together. But what sealed the deal was that in biology, there's a technical use of the word convivium, and that is that when a set of a species lives in extreme isolation, it starts to develop its own traits that are separate from the rest of the species. And that's a convivium, which is, I think,
that's perfect.
Almost too on the
It's
nose.
one-to-one mapping of the concept. That's great.
Of what we are in Bombay Beach. We are a convivium. So we celebrated our first convivium in 2025, and it was a whole season in Bombay Beach that we had writing workshops and fora. Is that the plural of forum? Salons, and invited people to give lectures throughout the season. And then we did a big celebratory weekend, which was kind of Biennale-esque, but slightly more intimate.
I love thinking about the biologist in me is kicking in, thinking about the that's basically the engine of natural selection and evolution is geographic separation often, or sometimes resource separation, but that is often accelerated by a mountain range which grows and splits two species of, puma, or the islands in the Galapagos which split the finches to all segregate. And it's so interesting. It's interesting to me to think for a very, very long time, so many naturalists were confused by the east coast of South America had species that were very related to the west coast of Africa. And the only explanation they could think of was somehow these creatures, either God just does what he wants, or these creatures swam across the Atlantic, right? What else? How else could you do it? How else do you get two very similar species but different enough they've conviviated? Can we do that?
I'm shrugging in case
it's going to evolve. It's going to become a verb and a noun. I'm going to go with conviviated. They conviviated into their own kind of subclass of species. And just at the time, what absolutely nobody knew until 1960 was that South America and Africa were once connected. Like we didn't have plate tectonics. There's this like underlying theory which no one had any sense of and which explained everything. But that so many people wasted so much of their minds trying to figure out, like, oh my God, how do we solve this riddle? It's kind of like watching Severance. You
How
just
many
get this
riddles
riddle.
do we have like that now, do you think?
Oh, I think a ton. I think many. I think
We're going to solve another thing that's going to make other things that we thought were mysteries fall into place.
Yeah, I mean, I think even in neuroscience, in particularly like trying to understand, say, all of the subdivisions of like mental illnesses that we have that are sprinkled throughout like the DSM, the most current version of the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right? Like schizophrenia and certain types of bipolar and certain types of depression, like all these things. I think if you take each one as maybe like a species, and what modern scientists are trying to do and psychiatrists are trying to do is like figure out which of these are related, which aren't. How did we get here? Like, how did we have this speciation? Why does when a brain breaks, it breaks in a very specific way? It's kind of strange that like every mental illness is not its own unique thing. Like there are actually patterns and commonalities. You could easily imagine building a system such that anytime anything goes wrong, it collapses into its own extremely unique version of like failure. But instead, like the human mind seems to break in like a somewhat reliable way. So yeah, I think we in neuroscience, like we do not have plate tectonics yet. We do not have some underlying concept that makes so much of it make sense. We're like pre a lot of those things. But the point being, like, it's really interesting to think about Bombay Beach started as a place that people went to in order to intentionally isolate geographically and to think about the almost like emotional speciation consequences of that. And even it's so clear that like, you know, another large festival was happening at the exact same time in the weekend, but it's so clear that there's like a division of the kind of art that gets done, even the kind of music, right?
He's referring to Coachella.
Yeah. I've just never said that word out loud. I didn't want to mispronounce it.
And then I had an interesting experience, my first of being hypnotized in Bombay Beach. I've been trying.
Real? Is hypnotism real?
So this is the question that keeps coming up, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to engage with that. Like, so first I'd have to understand what that question means. Is it real? So first I'm going to describe what happens, and then I want you to apply the question and explain the question. Is it real? What does it mean? You know, like, was I transported to another place where I wasn't conscious and then was influenced? No, I think, but that's a kind of caricature of hypnosis, which, you are getting very sleepy. But there is this field of hypnotherapy where you're kind of put into a meditative state. I think that's acknowledged to be real, let's say. I mean, is meditation real by this question?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I have the whole anti-meditation rant, but
oh, okay. So you're going to be harder to convince then, because I saw it as a kind of guided meditation in which I was. But let me back up a bit and say why. What
even happens? Can you explain just the physicality of it? Like,
first I'm going to start with the motivation.
Okay.
Let's do it. This in just simple teleological order here. Is teleology real? So I have been trying desperately, as I imagine a lot of people have, to limit my screen time. And the problem is, like, unlike quitting cigarettes or heroin, imagine if you were a heroin addict and they told you, okay, but you have to use heroin like 7 times a day.
A little bit, yeah.
But don't use it 100 times a day.
Right. If your insurance calls you, you have to shoot up.
Yeah, exactly. Or your work, or you have to figure out how to get somewhere, or you have to call your friends, or
to get out your boarding pass for the plane flight you have.
So it's really hard. I imagine this is how people with overeating disorders feel, because you have to eat, right?
Interesting.
It's easy to cut out alcohol or heroin or cigarettes because they're just bad, and you just have to stop. And in that case, I have heard very often of people who had a lot of trouble quitting cigarettes, let's say, finally succeeding with some version of hypnosis. So the first example I heard of this was my father's very dear friend from his whole life, Mr. Klaus von Bülow. If you know the movie Reversal of Fortune.
Of course I do.
Yes. Yeah, this is a good aside, actually. A long parenthesis. But when in the 1940s, a mysterious man of maybe noble descent from Denmark, but who had gone to like law school in England, came to Capri, and everyone was curious about this kind of darkly mysterious, handsome, pale man named Klaus von Bülow, and he maybe added the von himself. He might have just been Klaus Bülow.
I should do that.
And my father immediately liked him, and in order to make him more interesting and even more mysterious, he started telling his friends that that Klaus was a necrophiliac, and he only came out at night. And suddenly everyone started inviting him to dinner parties. And I discovered this because I went to the first time I went to London, I was 18 years old, and I asked my father, "Do you know anyone who you should stay with?" And he said, "Call the murderer." And again, this will make more sense as I'm telling the story circuitously, but I end up at his house, and I open a book about famous murderers, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to this Klaus von Bülow, chapter 5 of famous murderers. And the first sentence of said chapter is, Klaus von Bülow was a nobody until Prince Tao Ruspoli started calling him a necrophiliac.
It's a fantastic opening line.
So,
That's great.
Then it doesn't mention it again. And so, of course, as soon as I saw my dad again a few weeks later in Italy, I said, "Why does this book say that you made Klaus famous by calling him a necrophiliac?" And so he explained that 1949, they're both in their 20s, they're hanging out in Capri, and it's just post-World War II. He becomes friends with him, and he starts telling his friends that Klaus is a necrophiliac to make him more interesting. And then Klaus leaves the island, and people start asking what happened to Klaus. And my father invented a letter, as if it was written from Klaus, but he just wrote it himself so he could show his friends. And it said, "Dear Dado, I've received your invitation to ski in St. Moritz. How do you expect me to dig through all that snow to find my dead bodies? It's a lot of work." And he thought this was funny. Klaus was appalled, and he's like, "You've gone too far. You've taken the joke too far. People think I'm a monster now." And then 6 months later, he writes back saying, "Start talking again, because no one's inviting me to dinners, and I've realized all publicity is good publicity." Anyway, so that's how he became known at first. Then cut to a few years later, he married a very wealthy American heiress, and she was kind of hooked on drugs and alcoholic and very just unhappy person. Is this one version of the story? I don't want to libel anyone, but she died, and he was accused of murdering her, and he was convicted of murdering her. And then he called in Alan Dershowitz,
who my mom was working for
at the time.
Yeah.
This is a crazy coincidence. And Alan Dershowitz managed to get him off on appeal, but a lot of people still thought that he did it. Right. And it got turned into a movie, which I highly recommend everyone watch, called Reversal of Fortune, which stars Jeremy Irons, and Jeremy Irons won the Best Actor award for playing Klaus von Bülow opposite Glenn Close, who played Sonny von Bülow, who he was accused of murdering.
Yeah.
What's that sound?
Someone's moving the...
Oh. Sorry, minor interruption. Anyway, This is such a good story. We can dwell on it further. But the only reason I'm bringing it up now is that when I went to stay with Klaus, he had just quit a lifelong 100 cigarette a day habit, 5 packs a day. He used to have his suit jackets custom tailored to have the inside pocket hold a cigarette holder that was big enough for 100 cigarettes.
100 cigarettes.
That's a lot of cigarettes. You know, I mean, that's like literally lighting one off the other, waking up in the middle of the night to smoke one because you can't get through the night.
It took me 3 years to stretch out 100.
Yeah, exactly. You should tell this story.
I will.
And he had tried, as all smokers do, to quit in various ways. And I asked him, how did you finally succeed in quitting? And he said, hypnotherapy.
Amazing.
So that was my first kind of hint that whether or not this is real, maybe like a placebo, right? You know, is a placebo real? It shows that the mind is capable of doing things that maybe don't have simple mechanisms, causal mechanisms apparent, but something is happening. And then I get to Bombay Beach, and there's a beautiful woman named Fig, who's part of the Mars College, which is another fascinating project that's happening in Bombay Beach. And Fig has just hypnotized our mutual friend Gallo to get him to quit smoking. And it worked. So I said, well, can you hypnotize me to limit my screen time? And she said, I've never done that, but let's try. And she said that, you know, a lot of people that she helps say that, oh, well, they would have done it anyway. That's the first kind of reaction to people's being helped through it. And of course, it's hard to tell. Like, are you doing it through your own willpower, or is the hypnosis having? So, and I said to her, look, I've tried everything. I had one of these like boxes that has a time lock on it. I think you had one of these too.
Oh, yeah.
You put your phone into, and then you say, I can't pull it out for 4 hours. And
it's my time safe.
Safe.
The most useful writing tool I've ever had.
Yeah, but you have to like have the willpower to actually put the phone in there. So I did that for a few times, but then I stopped doing it.
I actually one time, so I used to put my phone and just the power cable to my internet router, because the whole router wouldn't fit. And it took me like a month to figure out I just needed the power cable to put in there, because I can't make one of those from scratch. And literally I went through 2 time safes because one time I just wanted my phone so bad that I lived in downtown LA in this concrete building with these huge concrete doors, and I just took the plastic time safe and I just smashed it over and over in my door till it broke.
Really?
Well, because I used to do this thing where I figured out that if I shook the safe, my phone would think there was some agitation and it would turn on the screen, at which point I could look at my notifications. And then I realized that I kept Siri on. So if I yelled at it, hey Siri, the phone would wake up. And if I was like kind of looking at it from below, like holding it up and looking at it from below, I could see my notifications. And then so I realized, okay, I need to like go into airplane mode plus put it in the time safe so that I don't have my notifications.
So that initial friction was too much for me.
Yeah.
After the novelty of having the safe wore off, I stopped using it, and it's sitting collecting dust in a corner of my studio ever since for years. So that was attempt number 1. Attempt number 2 that I've tried is like turning the screen to black and white. I've tried turning, and then again, you just put it back into color soon because it's annoying and you want to take a picture and you want to see what it actually looks like. Or, you know, eliminating the offending apps like Instagram, but then I find it just mutates into another form. It's like the medium is the message, it doesn't matter what it is you're looking at. You just want to look at something, and we're so addicted to these fucking things.
Well, there are displacement addictions. You know, people try to like, they shunt their addiction for thing A to thing B, which is slightly less bad, or they think it's slightly less bad, right? So that makes sense. There's a kind of like a slow staircase back to...
Danny, can you just double check, because I'm not able to look at it. Can you just make sure that both Logic and QuickTime are still recording? This is a new way of recording here, so I would be annoyed if for some reason either of them had stopped.
If this just disappeared. There was no posterity. Oh, it'd be like the Quonset hut.
What's that?
La la la. That's called camouflage. But also my mic picked it up. So you're done for. Now you change your passwords.
Both still okay. Amazing. I love when technology works. So I tried the
Tried the safe.
the safe. I tried black and white.
Black and
I
white.
tried deleting the apps. I tried like apps that make you try and stop. So like they make you wait 60 seconds before you can open an app. All of these things kind of, work for a little bit and then stop. And the screen time just always crept up to like 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And I'm like, I'm really wasting my life. And then I started getting neck pain, which it seems it's called tech neck. Like people get it from looking too much at their phones. And I was like, I'm still suffering from this a bit. So I said, Fig, if you help me, I get my screen time below 3 hours. 100% it will be you, because there's no other explanation. If for 4 or 5 years somebody tries to do something and it doesn't work, and then so she's like, okay, challenge accepted. And so she did some pre-interviews trying to like understand what I want, what might be the causes of my phone addiction, what my habits are, what I would like to be doing instead. And she kind of took notes as she talked to me. And then this was like for a week, we kind of casually, and then we had our first session, and I laid down on a bed, closed my eyes, and basically she had a very like soothing voice and lulled me into a place of kind of half sleep. Again, it's kind of a guide. I've had guided meditations. It felt very similar. And the concept is that obviously we know consciously that we shouldn't be doing the things we're doing. So again, the cigarette example is simpler. So you shouldn't smoke cigarettes. There's not much reason to smoke cigarettes, right? Like we can talk about this with your reference to your book maybe. But mainly our conscious rational mind knows that this is a bad idea. Right. But the decision is not being made by that rational mind. It's being made by some unconscious drives. And the idea of the hypnosis is to just pummel the rational and conscious stuff that you know to be true into your more unconscious decision-making part of your mind. So as you're in this lulled state, she just kept repeating to me things that I already very well know. The phone is not your friend. Like your compulsion to look at it is not based on things that you actually want. It's based on algorithms that are designed by very intelligent people to hook you and to like your attention is a commodity.
So the format of this was like statements, almost like analytical statements.
Yeah, kind of repeated.
So what I find a few things interesting here about this. One, because the meditation you do is TM, right? The transcendental meditation, which comes with a mantra.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to repeat that, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if your years of practicing meditation, which you didn't necessarily think would lead to this, but actually helped you be like receptive to this particular brand of mantra-based, analytic-based, because it also sounds like she's creating like a tractatus, like Wittgenstein's tractatus of like a series of analytic propositions that you can go through as you're about to use your phone that are like, this phone is not my friend. This phone is not for me.
And then like, I remember her saying, every time you have the compulsion to pick it up, just take a few breaths and ask yourself, do I really need to look at this right now? And the answer most of the time is no. So listen to that side of you. And anyway, again, like you're there and you're not sure if this is doing anything. You're hearing stuff that you know to be true. It's not like new information. And yet, and again, I'm sure there's a placebo side of this. In fact, I don't know what it would mean for it to be anything but placebo, but placebo is real. If you ask, like, is placebo real? I think the answer to that is yes. There's enough evidence for placebo to be.
It sounds very similar to almost like moral imperatives and moral statements. So we grew up in a society that tells us not to do certain things. And often we believe, even if we've never been punished for running a red light, we stop at red lights without ever once having the like literal, like a neuron tucked away in your brain has no idea what the moral code is of the world we live in. But
Do red lights work?
Yeah,
oh, no, sorry.
They work.
Are they real?
Well, I mean, but
is the mechanism by which they make you stop real? They're not physically impelling you to stop.
That's
right?
what I'm trying to say. Is that it sounds like this is as real as a moral code or something like it's a belief. You're kind of incepting a belief system into something about how you think about the world. It's almost as if you're a proper hypnotherapy session would create at the end the idea that smoking is immoral or something, something that you truly then believed and you would do as infrequently as you ran a red light or murdered someone or something like, or maybe had sex with a corpse.
The interesting thing is that like the first person I told about this was someone in Bombay Beach who was like a rationalist, let's say, in the kind of caricature, but he's like, that's not real. That was the first thing he said. It's not real. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, all I care about is whether it brings my screen time down. Then whether we can post hoc like rationally explain it, or whether there are a bunch of people, charlatans, like who are saying that they're hypnotizing you and they're not, or does it mean anything to actually be hypnotized? All I care about, unlike consciousness studies where behaviorism is not enough, all I care about is the behavior here. Like, all I want to know is, does my screen time go down? And then, yes, it worked. And if not, no. And then whether it's real or not, it seems like an irrelevant question along those lines. And sure enough, when I as soon as the hypnosis ended, my screen time went down, not to 3 hours, to 2 hours. It was like an hour and a half for the next like 2 weeks. Now it's creeping again. And so she's actually coming this afternoon. She happens to have rented a house in Yucca Valley. I'm really happy to do a little follow-up session, which people have said you need, even with smoking cessation.
Sure.
I also read The Easy Way to Stop Smoking Cigarettes. I read Alan Carr's The Easy Way to Quit Smoking. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
And he does hypnosis, and then he tries to hypnotize you in the book. So there's like, have you read it?
I have, yeah.
So you like repeat certain things over and
over
again.
This is what I'm seeing as the pattern. To me, I'm trying to kind of figure out the mechanism by which, like, I'm very agnostic to like the idea that mind control is amongst us and around us at all times. Right. This was my PhD work was on like a parasite changing a mind and changing preferences, and I deeply believe that there's no material difference between a parasite changing a preference and like a show you watch or a piece of fiction you read as a kid changing the way that you see the world, or a mantra that someone comes in and says something to you that really is meaningful and that you repeat and therefore changes your behavior. So I totally agree with you that anything that ends up changing the behavior outcome, especially if that's a preferred outcome and that was the goal, it works and therefore it is real. So yeah, I don't mind at all, even as a like very hardcore materialist, imagining that a statement, which by the way does have a physical component, right? Like someone was speaking to you, which was impinging on the hair cells in your ear to then be transduced into sound and speech, which you now then probably hear in your head. Like when you pick up a phone, do you hear her?
No, not so much. It's more just like I've incorporated it into my own thought process.
So that's where it feels a bit like a moral code to me.
Yeah.
Which is
so my question, I guess, is what is the mysterious thing that hypnotherapists claim that rationalists say is not real?
What strikes me about what I know about hypnotism is just the idea that you're kind of subtly put to sleep, or subtly, like that there's a kind of state in between full consciousness and being like knocked out, and that state has a heightened sense of suggestibility.
Right.
I feel like that's the fundamental kind of premise.
The claim.
That's the claim.
That's the claim that people think it might be full of shit.
Right. And I mean, there are a lot of ways to kind of like knock someone off kilter. Like you can just do so many things to make someone not quite in a fully conscious, coherent state. And then like you could give someone a concussion, at which point they are more susceptible to certain things because they're just simply not using all of their faculties. And, you know, like I think that would be barbaric to consider that hypnosis.
Right.
But if the mechanism is similar, you know, you're going to have different effects with a concussion where you're not remembering it.
Yeah.
But like, I, for example, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
Right-handed, right. So I would claim that, first of all, I want to see the actual data. I want you to export your screen time data over years because I need to know whether or not that was just a seasonal dip for you to go down to 2 hours. I need to see the like longitudinal data, right? Because I love it's too easy to like pick out a story from a very small window of time.
Yeah. I know I see my mind working that part of me wants it. Obviously I want it to work.
Yeah, but that's fine if it does work.
So one of the mechanisms that's at play here is that I want to prove that it worked. Yeah, and therefore I have it gamified the screen time a little bit.
So, but why are you more interested in the kind of like avant-garde, strange Bombay Beach version of hypnotherapy? Because you ran into a person who knew about another, you know, like it's almost as if you're being seduced by the story of it, which
of course
I am someone who gets seduced by stories. So
yeah.
I do not begrudge.
But I would say maybe that's part of the larger umbrella of the hypnosis. Maybe.
Absolutely. So I would say, and this is again, the materialist in me. I bet if you like sprained your right wrist and were in a cast for 3 months, if you're right-handed, that would reduce your screen time below 2 hours.
So I have this neck pain, which I know is aggravated by the phone.
Yeah.
And what's most frustrating, what makes it so feel like a drug addiction, is that I will pick up the phone, A, knowing that I don't need to be using it,
right.
and B, knowing that it's physically hurting me.
Physically harmful.
And C, doing it anyway.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the thing where it's like, if there's this razor's edge where, you know, again, if you're taking the cigarettes example, if you know this is killing you and you know that it's giving you, you know, shorter life and all of these things, and you're picking it up anyway, what is that tiny thing that can just push you over to the choosing not to do it, you know? And again, I think this might be a question. I'd be curious what Sapolsky thinks, if this could be one of the factors of your decision-making process, none of which is up to you. Would he count the hypnosis as one of the, you know, he says there's so many factors from the neurochemical going on right before to the evolutionary that was happening for millions of years. Like, could that be one of the things that counts as a cause?
And just by the way, Mr. Severance is irrelevant to my life. The way that you described, like, oh, and then I entered into a subconscious state in the subconscious that is percolating up and telling me what not to do. That's straight. That's straight Severance. So on this 100 cigarettes
now I like
thing,
the show even better
because it's about me. 100 cigarettes.
And I didn't even know. It was like unconsciously about me, and it was actually helping me.
Gee.
That's why my screen time's gone down from watching the show.
So, all right. So I do actually stand behind this. Like, if you broke your right wrist, you would use the phone a lot less. Like, introducing friction into a lot of these things is actually one of the most useful things to do, so this whole 100 cigarettes from Klaus, right? So for the past 3 years, I wanted to stop smoking. I started smoking in grad school, mostly because Stanford had a no smoking policy, and there was just something like very oppositional about me.
Yeah. You don't say.
And a couple of years ago, I just know it's right. It's bad. You know you're not supposed to. One is getting old. One's body is falling apart. You don't want to accelerate or help the process along. And so I decided to give myself 100 cigarettes for the rest of my life. And this was my version, right? Like I never once put cigarettes into the time safe, in part because I know that like I can just go to the corner store. Like, you can always get them. Right. Like, so there was such an artificial way of distancing myself from the substance. But there's something about the story of 100 cigarettes, and then once it's over, it's over.
I loved it. By the way, you say I'm being seduced by stories. Like, that was one of your great ideas. The moment you said it, like, I would tell everyone, like, my friend Patrick, instead of quitting smoking right away, or instead of like, he's allowing himself 100 cigarettes for the rest of his life. And I just was immediately enamored with this concept.
Well,
and its approach.
In part, I actually very much think that if you have something that's kind of harming you and you're aware that it's harming you, keeping it as a demon actually makes you more likely to kind of revisit it and find it again, because life has its ups and downs, and like I just feel like if it's a thing that you believe that it's a temptation, and you believe that you're not strong enough to resist, and all these almost like biblical free will negation versions of things, I feel like that's giving it too much credit, and it's kind of letting it win. It's ceding a lot of control to it if it's this bad thing that you can't not but revisit. And so for me, the giving myself 100 cigarettes and only 100 allowed myself to still enjoy it. Like I still got to enjoy each of the 100, which I did. And I'm now over. I'm done.
I thought you were going to try and stretch it out asymptotically so that you were like 90 years old smoking your last cigarette. Did you have some part of you wanted to do that, or did you know you're going to smoke the 100? Like, how long did it take?
About 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, no, my plan was to keep many in reserve so that like at some point in the future, I don't know, like if I have a kid or like I have a grandkid or something, I'll be like, okay, my lineage is sound. I can
smoke the 97th.
Yeah. But no, at some point when it got to single digits remaining, and this just happened recently within the last couple months, I started to get really burdened by the idea that I wasn't finished. Like a lot of really odd psychological things happened throughout the 100. One of them being my goal here is to make like a book at some point, a kind of quasi memoir called My Last 100 Cigarettes.
But was the book idea, did it come at the same time as the idea of quitting by giving yourself 100 cigarettes?
I imagined the title. So I imagined the title, and then I was like, oh, that's a perfect title. And then I'm very committed when I commit. So I'm like, okay, that means I have to do 100. And in order for any of them to be meaningful, right? Like you've said, if you ever lie or cheat about any of them, if those 100 are not 100, then the whole project falls apart. Like
although the title is ambiguous, we've talked about this, right?
Yeah, I could start it whenever I want.
It could mean just the last 100. Like you could just say like my last cup of coffee doesn't necessarily mean the last one of your life. It just means the last one you've had up until this moment.
It is intentionally.
So you could easily write the sequel, which was like my next 100 cigarettes.
Yeah. My last 100 cigarettes, now with more cigarettes. So this thing kept happening where
Wait, unpack the book a little bit more. Like, what was the idea?
Yeah, the idea is just I started taking notes, almost like journal entries for each cigarette of the last 100, and I have them like each one is a chapter. So every chapter is a number. It starts at 100 and it slowly goes down to 0, because after I'd had one and crossed that off, I decided to make the last chapter because I really wanted one cigarette. I decided the whole last chapter, the 0, is about the like philosophy of ordinal numbers, like whether or not 0 is a number. It was mostly an excuse for me to have one more. But I started having interesting I started to actually seek out stories. So one of the curses of this idea is that if it's going to be a book, each one kind of has to be interesting. Like I'm a writer, so part of me is like, well, okay, you have to make these cigarettes interesting. Each one has to be narratively like propulsive in its own way, which got me into some awkward traps. Like in Vienna, I went on a date and I had a cigarette and I told this woman the story of the book. And then we went on a second date and she smoked and I was like, no, I'm good. And her response was, oh, am I just like a 1 cigarette girl to you? And she's like, oh, this date isn't interesting enough to be written down. And so suddenly I became like you must encounter this, like almost like a documentarian where people expect you to be archiving your experiences. But then when you're like, nah, this one doesn't quite make it to the level of worth archiving. Yeah. People get offended.
Right.
But then same
thing with, it's like now I even like using the phone as a camera, which I usually do,
Right.
counts as screen time. So I need to like,
Right.
yeah, the picture has to be really good for me to take it. Otherwise, I'm like, here, can you take this picture, please?
Yeah, I hand off to I should hire someone to smoke cigarettes for me so I could still have them, or like keep someone to do that. And it became this interesting thing where I would search, because I knew it had to be written down. I would search out, sometimes when I wanted a cigarette, I had to find something narratively meaningful to do in order to have the cigarette, because I knew it had to be written down.
Right.
And this got actually really exhausting, to the point that I realized that it was becoming like, not like it was its own version of unhealthy. It was a bit too rigorous in its rule set, and I just wanted it over. Like and it was, what was really interesting is that I found myself combining my desire to finish a book with my desire to stop smoking. And instead of it being exclusively a negative thing, whereas I've taken the addiction and been like, that's a dark thing and I must avoid it, and I have to look the other way, like staring at the sun, right? You're not supposed to stare at the sun, but just imagine a pack of like hand-rolled tobacco instead of the sun. I'm not supposed to be looking at it. Instead, I did this really weird, like alchemical thing where I aligned something I wanted to get rid of with something that is the thing which drives me the most in the world, which is finishing a book. And I couldn't finish the book until I was done. And so they kind of like converged in an interesting way, and I just wanted it over because I wanted to write it. And so now I'm actually like entirely at peace with the idea that I'm done. And
so basically you hypnotized yourself.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe I basically turned my desire to write into a mantra that became a thing, which every cigarette I would ask myself, I mean, you know, occasionally the date was right. Like it wasn't worth the chapter. Not everyone gets a whole chapter. Where I found myself asking, like, is this cigarette worth it? And for me, it had to be narratively worth it.
Yeah.
So really what this hypnotherapy might be doing is kind of creating an adjustable threshold, right? Where you really are asking, like, what is this worth? And rather than kind of habitually engaging with something, just kind of very intentionally engaging with something.
Aaron sent us a tweet or just an anecdote about someone who put on a nicotine patch every time they went running, in the hopes of getting addicted to running.
Right.
And
I love that. Yeah.
So that they would associate. I wonder, would that really work?
I presume so. I mean, addictions are extremely complicated and ultimately psychological, but there is a physiological undercurrent to it, right? Like if you can rewire your habituations to things. And so that, I feel like that's actually very similar to what I was saying, which is that about how I collapsed my desire to write a book with this negative thing. So that's taking something the guy hated, right? I think the story, as it was told to us, was the guy wanted to be a runner, but he just couldn't ever do it. His entire life never did. So this was something he really hated doing. But then nicotine, of course, gives you a high. Mm-hmm. And so he took the hated thing and applied just this physiological level of reward to it, and then became a runner.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the mind would be clever enough to just like say, okay, I just became addicted to this nicotine patches and just like stopped wearing it when he was.
No, are you kidding me? To be addicted to cigarettes is to be addicted to nicotine, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't just start wearing the nicotine patch without running.
Oh, without running. Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's
so.
pretty much everything I want to say for
now. What will it look like? What will you do if it comes back? If the demon resurfaces?
Oh, it's been resurfacing.
Demon. Yeah.
So yesterday, I kept it under 3 hours, but I could feel the creep. And then yesterday, I figured out I was robbed. I'm very, don't talk about this.
Aren't you supposed to not?
No, I'm not, no. They just said take down the Facebook post.
Oh, okay.
And lest I really doubt the thieves listen to our podcast. They probably
Maybe they're using it to geolocate us.
I'm gonna save this story until it's resolved. That's probably wise. We'll leave this on a cliffhanger. I was robbed and we're chasing after the thieves. Yeah, I think that's. I think we should reconvene on Crete.
Oh yes,
that might be the next time we see each other. I'm
Yeah,
hoping we see each other
probably.
sooner than that. But in case we don't, now it's in April. What's the date today? 17th, something like that.
Yeah.
And in a couple of months, one thing that Patrick and I has turned into a kind of ritual or habit is meeting at consciousness conferences in exotic locations.
Specifically the Mediterranean, it seems.
Yes, we met at one on a former leper colony off of Venice, Italy. We went to Sicily in the same town that White Lotus was filmed on, since TV shows seem to be a theme today. And then,
I'm narratively driven. I'll always bring things around to the story. Yeah, season 2 White Lotus.
And actually,
Termina.
you should come to Vignanello, because you said you like going to places where things are filmed. But then they did the Decameron.
I do.
Although I heard the Decameron was not very good. Did you watch it?
I hate watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you watch it enough to make you want to come and hang out?
It was just the
Vignanello for a
establishing
few
scenes. The interiors are different, right?
Yes.
So the thing that I
Not the
love.
establishing, any scenes that took place outside. All the gardens.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I love the pure joy that I get is when I've seen a location in fiction or in film or somehow, like kind of virtually or remotely, and then when I visit it in real life for the first time, I get this kind of like warm, euphoric deja vu, because my brain knows that it's been in this space. I'm using air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
It's been here before, but it hasn't really. So I love that feeling more than anything. So
Do you
yes,
think
it would.
does it retroactively make the experience of watching the show or the film even richer by seeing the three-dimensional space and being inside of it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a like hack to. I think it beautifies the memory of whatever piece of fiction or film or TV.
I think that's
saw.
right. I think the first experience I had of this, and I think it was with you, is being on a boat in Lake Tahoe and going to find the house.
Godfather house.
Of the Godfather house. And we were really excited. And I didn't know this about you, and I didn't know it about myself or about anybody. I hadn't thought about this, but why is it so exciting to go see the house where the Godfather was filmed? Like, it was one of these things where it just seemed obvious, like, yeah, let's go see it. But then why is it so interesting and satisfying? And I think that's right. It makes you, it enriches the memory of the film, which is not just a memory, it's kind of an understanding of the film and a kind of experience of it, which goes obviously beyond the time of watching it.
Yeah, well, there's this like truism in kind of memory research and within neuroscience and cognitive science, which is like you're not remembering the experience, you're remembering the last time you remembered the experience. Mm-hmm. So you tend to overwrite things as you remember them. And so imagine Godfather house. You see it once on film. Maybe you see the movie again. Maybe you kind of replay the film in your head, and you remember it 100 times in your life. Mm-hmm. And then you take a boat and see the movie, see the house. The next time you remember it, your memory is filled in with all the details of both the film that kind of narratively happened also there, plus all of the richness of the vivid detail that you had from experiencing it. So now literally you go back to the movie, but it's had this like, it's like someone painted it fresh, painted it new in your memory.
I wonder if sometimes it's the opposite. If you find out, the place is really banal, and then it not nearly as mysterious or beautiful as it was conveyed in the film, and therefore it worsens the memory.
So what I'm super excited about is like, I don't know, I've never been to Greece. Like there's so much that I think I have of ancient Greek kind of either both history and all the philosophy, all Western philosophy like was birthed there. And so like I just all of that will suddenly have like a locale in my head if when I visit.
Yeah,
And
so
you-
it's,
yeah.
yeah, so it's not just movies. It's
It's
great.
not just movies.
I've had this experience often of being in Europe, and you're like, oh, we're in this beautiful island, and they're like, oh, this is where like Homer set that one, part of the Odyssey, and you're like, oh, that, and it's the same effect of going to the Godfather house. It's really cool to be like on the place at the island where like the sirens, where Odysseus tied himself to the mast or whatever.
I just realized that one of the joys of finishing my last 100 cigarettes is going to be getting to revisit each of the 100 cigarettes in my memory. the joys of those moments.
Put on a nicotine patch.
Yeah,
each
I
time that
should.
you do.
I should. That's
Okay.
great. And it's called, by the way, there's a phrase for what we're talking about, this deja vu travel. There's jet setting, right? Which is you go around the world. The phrase for this particular phenomenon is called set jetting.
Oh, then when you go and visit the places.
When you go and
from
visit
fiction.
the set, yeah, from fiction.
All right, people are wandering in, people are shuffling in their seats. I can see that time has come to close this out.
Is everyone getting agitated like a migratory bird,
Yes.
prevented from from migrating?
Good to see you, Patrick.
Likewise.
More soon. Oh yeah, in Crete. We'll do a next episode in 2 months, not a year.